What's up, everyone? I'm Safi. Fifi is not here with me right now. We're trying something different. You all saw her video a few weeks ago, so it is my turn to kind of invite you all into my journey and experiences, looking at my general trajectory on how I got to where I'm at in terms of like my path and what I want to do for the world. So, for starters, I am a black trans man. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm polyamorous. I'm pansexual. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York to a black American father, and my mom is mixed race. And yeah, I think that a lot of my path with what I'm doing with Fifi and what we want to end up doing with our wellness center, the kind of driving force behind it is my journey with mental health as a black trans man and of like a Caribbean background as well, acknowledging both the ways that I've been oppressed and the ways that I've been privileged. A lot of what I struggled with, my strife, was my mental health. And I struggled with my mental health issues from a really young age. I come from a really chaotic family, and my diagnostics now, or my diagnoses, are complex post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse disorder, and a plethora of other things, like obsessive compulsive disorder, neuro-divergent. So yeah, I didn't know any of that, because culturally, that's not what I was raised around. I come from also a long line of untreated mental illness, untreated addiction, and generational trauma, and that's just kind of the norm. And also tackling onto that, like my transness, culturally, like transness and gayness and queerness is not really acceptable in like a Caribbean home in Brooklyn, at least for me. These were all like standards that I was raised around, and I'm already like a neurotic, anxious, depressed. Like all of these things started happening at a really young age. Like I remember wanting to die very young, and that's me just being totally honest. And from then on, it was just kind of like battling masculinity, battling transness, battling mental health, coming from a family that was really chaotic in a lot of ways. Definitely came from a family of people who said, like, I'll give you something to cry about. Corporal punishment was a standard. It was very normal culturally to get our asses beat, to be honest. So, like, carrying all that, going to college, and this is where I start to being honest and, like, acknowledging my privilege, right? I am lighter skinned. To say that my light skin has not gotten me farther than a lot of my darker skinned counterparts and siblings would be not telling my whole story, not telling my entire legacy. And I think that a lot of lighter skinned black people walk into spaces, into the revolution, like, I'm black and I'm proud, and that's great, that's amazing. Self-hating, all that, like letting go of that, that's amazing. You know, really owning your blackness, that's great. But being mindful of the way I own my blackness and the way that I know that I cannot be the face and the center of blackness, and I have to uplift those around me. That being said, a lot of my privilege was that I ended up in spaces with white people often. So like when I went to a liberal arts school, I ended up going away to school, I took out loans, I am neck deep in debt, and really was able to assimilate with white people in a lot of ways, right, because of my lighter skin. And also like ways that I wasn't, and that's valid, right? My blackness is still valid, but there were ways that I could really be in a space with white people, and they were more willing to give me resources, especially around mental health. So I like go away to school. That's my first introduction to like transness, all that stuff. I come out as trans, and then that whole battle. And then I end up getting a therapist who was a white guy who I really got along with and really liked. And I was like a likable, to them, a palatable, likable black person. Colorism is an agent of white supremacy. It is white supremacy, right? So it's inaccurate for me to say that white people see me and other darker skinned black people the same. That's not true. That was my first argument, right? But really, they do treat me differently. So what happened was all my mental illnesses came into a head at college. I was self-harming, I was drinking, I was using. I was really just like a liability to myself. I was really hurting myself. And I ended up leaving school and really hitting a bottom with other vices. And then finally after that bottom, I like started on this path of some form of like healing and recovery. So I get on this path of healing and recovery. I kind of phase out all of these things in my life, like substances. And I'm like, all right, that's what it was. The substances were the problem. Not quite. So, shaving away all those things, what ends up coming up is like immense amounts of trauma that I did not know that I had. I did not know that like any of my upbringing would produce, and like being black and trans in the world would produce this survival thing in my core. My perspective of the world was that I had to protect myself, right? Like a lot of black trans people probably feel they need to do. And I had like this very intense episode for 2 months straight. I was dissociative, delusional. I was really sick, and I was really planning on hurting myself. You know, when I think about that, and I was in a space where I shared about that, and a white person came up to me and was like, you seem like you're in a really dark place. I work for this intensive outpatient program. This will all be free to you. You can go receive services there and it will all be free. You don't have to pay for it. And a lot of people are like, that was like so the universe or whatever. It was also like, sure, maybe, but it was also a lot of it was privilege. Acknowledging now that in the eyes of white supremacy, my skin color makes me palatable in comparison. So what happened was I did get better in a lot of ways, for sure. There was forms of therapy that really helped me because I was really on a dark path. I ended up really having also, like, why can't this be accessible to everybody who looks like me or looks different or is darker than me or like looks different than me? Why is it just me? It was just me there. I was the only fucking black person at this treatment center and it was out of control. So I'm sitting there like, this is great. I'm learning how to do DBT and mindfulness and like trauma therapy, and that's amazing, and I'm getting it for free. And then there's also the mindset, I got a scholarship for this thing. Then there's also the mindset of like, I can't be imperfect after this because this was free to me and I owe it to them. I owe it to these white people to show up differently than the other white people at the program. Sure, it's very radical to say that black and brown bodies and trans and queer bodies and marginalized bodies deserve therapy. They deserve it. Yes. But the way that therapy, like what it's built on, right? It's still built in white supremacy. It's still built in the way in which we want to assimilate to a colonial world. And that's what I was accessing, and that's great in terms of like it got me out of the rut that I was in, for sure. But now how can I transfer that to my peers? How can I become someone who makes these resources accessible to other black and brown bodies? And that's the point of everything that Fifi and I are doing. We want to make this accessible to other black and brown bodies. We want to decolonize it. We want it to be something real and something that really speaks to all parts of being alive in this world as we are. That's me, you know, and this journey does not stop. We have so much fucking work to do. I have so much to learn and unlearn about myself and to decolonize. It's just starting, man. I thought I had arrived a long time ago, but it's really just starting. Thank you all for bearing with me. You all, like everyone ever, is very near and dear to my heart. I'm just so excited to keep learning with you all. I'm so excited to call out and be called out, you know. So, yeah, any feedback is always great. All right, bye.